In the early hours of June 21, 2025, the world watched as tensions between the United States and Iran escalated dramatically into direct military action. The United States launched a series of precision airstrikes targeting three key Iranian nuclear facilities: the Fordo Fuel Enrichment Plant, the Natanz Enrichment Complex, and the Isfahan Nuclear Technology Center. This bold move was the culmination of years of escalating rhetoric and failed diplomatic efforts. The primary justification provided by Washington was the prevention of Iran acquiring a nuclear weapon, a goal the US administration has long declared a red line for international security and a direct threat to its allies in the Middle East. The operation was carried out with advanced military technology, including B-2 stealth bombers equipped with powerful bunker-buster munitions designed to penetrate deeply buried and fortified structures. The Pentagon reported that the strikes were successful in their objectives, aiming to significantly set back Iran's nuclear program for the foreseeable future. President Trump announced that the sites had been completely and totally obliterated, framing the action not as the start of a war, but as a decisive measure to force Iran back to the negotiating table. The message was clear: abandon the nuclear ambitions or face even greater consequences from American military might. This direct confrontation immediately sent shockwaves across the globe, creating a new and highly unpredictable geopolitical landscape. For decades, the international community had navigated the complex issue of Iran's nuclear program through a delicate balance of sanctions, diplomacy, and monitoring. The US airstrikes shattered that fragile status quo, replacing it with the stark reality of open conflict between two powerful adversaries. The action was immediately praised by close allies like Israel, with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu calling it a bold decision that would change history. But it also drew swift and sharp condemnation from many other corners of the world. The significance of this event cannot be overstated, as it pushes the entire Middle East closer to the brink of a wider, more devastating regional war. The strikes directly challenge the sovereignty of Iran and the established principles of international law, raising urgent questions at the United Nations about the legality of unilateral military force. As the dust settles over the targeted sites, world leaders are scrambling to understand the full implications of this action and to prevent a cycle of retaliation and counter-retaliation that could spiral out of control, threatening global peace, economic stability, and energy security for millions. Russia's reaction to the American airstrikes was swift, stern, and steeped in a long history of strategic rivalry with the United States. The Kremlin immediately issued a formal statement calling for maximum restraint from all parties involved. A spokesperson for the Russian Foreign Ministry publicly denounced the attack as a dangerous escalation and explicitly warned Washington against any further military intervention in the region. This official position underscored Moscow's deep-seated opposition to what it views as unilateral American aggression that bypasses international bodies like the United Nations Security Council, where Russia holds veto power and can block resolutions that do not align with its national interests. Beyond its official calls for peace, Moscow also voiced specific and grave concerns about the potential for a catastrophic nuclear disaster. The head of Rosatom, Russia's state nuclear energy corporation, highlighted the extreme risks associated with attacking nuclear facilities, pointing to the Bushehr nuclear power plant, which was built with Russian assistance. He warned that a strike on such a site could trigger a Chernobyl-style catastrophe, unleashing radioactive contamination that would have devastating environmental and humanitarian consequences across the entire region. This warning served as a powerful reminder of the unique and terrifying dangers inherent in a military conflict that targets nuclear infrastructure. While Russia's public statements focused on de-escalation and international law, its strategic actions are expected to follow a more nuanced path. Analysts widely believe that Moscow will quietly provide significant diplomatic and possibly technical support to its long-standing partner, Iran. This behind-the-scenes backing is part of Russia's broader strategy to counter American influence in the Middle East and strengthen its own position as a key power broker. By supporting Tehran, Russia not only helps a strategic ally, but also complicates American objectives, ensuring that Washington cannot dictate the future of the region without facing significant and organized opposition from other global powers. In essence, Moscow is playing a careful dual role in this escalating crisis. On one hand, it presents itself as a responsible global stakeholder, advocating for stability and adherence to international norms to prevent a full-blown war that would destabilize its southern flank. On the other hand, Russia sees a strategic opportunity to deepen its alliance with Iran, challenge American dominance, and reinforce its own relevance on the world stage. How Russia balances these two objectives, publicly urging peace while privately aiding an ally, will be a critical factor in determining whether the current conflict can be contained or if it will expand into a much larger confrontation. China, a global economic powerhouse with significant energy interests in the Middle East, reacted to the US strikes with a pronounced call for peace and diplomatic resolution. The Chinese Foreign Ministry expressed deep concern over the sudden escalation, urging all parties to exercise calm and restraint to avoid a further deterioration of the situation. In a pointed statement, Beijing accused the United States of pouring oil on the fire, a clear critique of what it sees as reckless unilateral action that undermines global stability. This response reflects China's consistent foreign policy principle of non-interference and its preference for resolving international disputes through dialogue and negotiation rather than military force. President Xi Jinping personally weighed in on the crisis, reinforcing his country's official position by appealing directly for a cessation of hostilities. He urged all sides, with a notable mention of Israel, to step back from the brink and return to the path of diplomacy. China's primary concern is the potential for a wider conflict to disrupt the global economy and, more specifically, to threaten the vital shipping lanes through which much of its imported oil travels. As the world's largest oil importer, China is acutely vulnerable to any instability in the Persian Gulf, making the preservation of peace in the region a core national interest for Beijing. Like Russia, China is expected to provide quiet diplomatic backing for Iran, a country with which it has cultivated a strong economic and strategic partnership. This support will likely manifest in international forums like the United Nations, where China will use its influence as a permanent member of the Security Council to advocate for Iran's sovereignty and condemn the US military action. However, China's immediate and practical response was also evident on the ground, as Chinese state media focused heavily on the successful evacuation of its nationals from Iran, demonstrating Beijing's primary commitment to the safety of its own citizens amid the growing chaos. Ultimately, China's reaction is guided by a pragmatic desire to protect its economic interests and enhance its stature as a responsible global leader. By positioning itself as a mediator and a champion of peace, Beijing seeks to contrast its approach with what it portrays as American belligerence. China's role in this crisis is therefore twofold: to work to de-escalate the immediate conflict, to secure the flow of energy and trade, and to leverage the situation to advance its long-term goal of building a multipolar world order, where American dominance is checked by other influential nations. Its calls for restraint are not just diplomatic niceties, they are essential to its vision for global stability. Facing a direct attack on its sovereign territory and a severe blow to its prized nuclear program, Iran now stands at a critical crossroads with several distinct and perilous options for retaliation. The most direct and high-risk path would be a conventional military counterstrike against American assets. High-ranking officials, including a close aide to the supreme leader, have publicly called for missile attacks on the US naval fleet in the Persian Gulf, while state media has declared every American in the region a potential target. This option would represent a dramatic escalation, inviting a massive and potentially devastating response from the United States and its allies. A second, more asymmetric strategy involves activating its extensive network of allied militant groups across the Middle East, often referred to as the Axis of Resistance. This could mean mobilizing Hezbollah in Lebanon to strike Israel, empowering Shiite militias in Iraq to attack US bases, or encouraging the Houthis in Yemen to disrupt maritime traffic in the Red Sea. Hezbollah's deputy leader has already pledged all forms of support, signaling a readiness to open new fronts. However, this option carries its own risks, as these proxy forces are reportedly depleted from other regional conflicts and may not be able to mount a sustained or effective campaign against well-armed adversaries. Iran's third major option lies in economic warfare, specifically by threatening the Strait of Hormuz, the world's most important oil choke point. By disrupting or attempting to close this narrow waterway, through which nearly a fifth of the world's daily oil supply passes, Tehran could send global energy prices soaring and potentially trigger a severe economic recession in the United States and other nations. This move would inflict significant pain on the global economy and punish the US for its actions, but it would also risk alienating key trade partners like China, and inviting a massive international naval response to reopen the strait by force. Finally, Iran will undoubtedly pursue a robust diplomatic and information campaign to rally support both at home and abroad. Its leaders have already condemned the US strike as a grave violation of international law and the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, framing Iran as the victim of illegal aggression. By claiming its nuclear capabilities remain intact and portraying the American attack as an admission of Israel's failure, Tehran is attempting to control the narrative and build a coalition of opposition against the United States. The path Iran chooses from these four options will not only determine its own fate, but will also shape the future of peace and security for the entire world.